Is it moral for workers to come together and form a union in that context? I don't think that's immoral. Now, is it moral to have those folks join a pension fund that's underfunded? If that's immoral, there are an awful lot of businesses in this country that do that every day. Right? Now, maybe they're behaving immorally. I don't know. I think the better question is, what are we going to do about the widespread underfunding of pensions? And what are we going to do about the illusion that we can provide retirement without funding? Those things seem to me to be the moral imperatives. And by the way, I don't think that the blame here. I don't think the labor movement is exempt from the blame here for this particular type of hallucination. I think that too many people have indulged the notion that you can have benefits without funding, and I just don't think you can. Now, I have to go, but I want to say one thing about common ground. My experience with TARP oversight has convinced me of two things, one of which I think has led me to have a certain amount of common ground with sort of serious and principled market thinkers. I really have a deep problem with the way in which we are essentially structuring financial regulation, and have structured it to protect the too big to fail institutions. I just think that that's not right in a whole bunch of different ways. And I think that the arguments that have been made by people like Peter Wallison and Alex Pollock about why it's really wrong to list them, right, to have a public policy where we have a list of too big to fail institutions, I think they're 100% right. And we've done everything we can to make that argument, because the reality is that, who's the public here that's pointing up to rescue these folks? It's our members. But I think there's another corollary of this that you probably won't applaud for, but I think it's a fact.
I think you should have reversed the order, because
I look at the events of the last year and I say to myself, if the Bush administration, the George W. Bush administration, is going to basically engage in this vast rescue of failed private enterprises, if that's what they're going to do, and they rescued everybody. They rescued the stockholders and the bondholders, and every layer of capital got rescued. If that's what the Bush administration is going to do, is there an administration that's not going to do that? Is it conceivable that we will ever have the political context, right? I'm not saying whether we should or shouldn't, but is it conceivable that we will ever have the political context in which that kind of thing in some fashion won't happen? And I think the answer, I think, is no. I think the only question is now, what are the rules going to be, and what are the upfront, what are the, to speak the Chicago language, what are the ex-ante kind of arrangements going to be? We know what the ex-post ones look like, right? And what are the ex-ante ones going to be? And what are the rules of the bailouts going to be? Right? And I think we kind of settled this again back in the Depression. I think that's more or less, we had a set of rules. It amazes me the kind of nostalgia among relatively conservative circles for the Reconstruction Finance Corporation. It's helped improve my faith that it's actually possible for people to come together on something reasonable. We had rules for bailouts, and those rules were tough. Right? Those rules were tough. Now we don't. I think we need some tough rules for bailouts, and I think we need to have some ex-ante rules that say, but I don't think we ought to be making lists of who gets bailed out in advance. I think it's a terrible idea. And I think that the conservative voices, the market-oriented voices who've been making that point are really doing the country a service. So on the assumption that some of those voices are in this room, I want to extend my thanks and gratitude. and I have to go.
Thanks, Damon. Just quickly, this gentleman has been patiently standing at the microphone for a while, so he gets his next shot. Damon, again, thank you very much.
My question is for the panel. There was some talk about how dire the employment situation is in this country right now, and that's very true. However, there are lots of countries in Europe that have had similar problems with unemployment, youth unemployment, for nearly 30 years. And if you read Paul Krugman's old Slate columns, he says the reason for that is their restrictive labor market policies. So my question for the panel is, given that, why would we want to adopt more restrictive labor market policies in the United States?
Amity? You want to take that first, Amity?
Okay. There are different, thank you for that question. The question is, why do we want to be like Europe, where youth has no future? I think there are different, do you remember a few years ago there was protesting in the French streets, and I think the Archbishop said, you're demanding too much, young people. You can't demand to have as much as your parents had, standard of living. And when you heard that, you had a lot of sympathy for the young people protesting in France. And what it reminds us is that when you give too many entitlements for too long, when you have a social democracy, a social welfare state, over generations, in the end, you deny young people that to which they are most entitled, their entitlement to economic growth generally, and therefore a future in their lives. So I and many of us have trouble with the European model, including the European healthcare model, for that reason. We do not want to be like them. They are free riders in many extents on us, for example, pharma, and it's just not a good comparison.
Let me just do the following, because I know time is short and we need to wrap this up. What I'd like to do is have Harold speak next, but then walk through each one sort of a last word before we just wrap up. So Harold, this will be your last word. Call on Amity one more time, and then again we'll finish with Todd.
I agree with some of the premise of that question. I think young people in Europe have faced real problems in the employment market there, but also I think if you look at the data, young people in this country have faced not the same problems, but problems that often have the same end result. We have employed more people, but if you look at the data about the economic standing of young people, as I quoted in that Peter Hart survey in my talk, we employ more, but at jobs that are often very unremunerative, and for which the economic ladder ain't what it used to be. So I think there is a problem. Each country has its own version, which reflects its own political economy, of the problem of young people in the economy, but I wouldn't point to either Europe or the United States as a success, and certainly not right now, in giving viable economic futures to millions of young people on either continent.